All right, this is a production of the Chicago Urban League, Culture, Race, and Equity, and it's all about getting everyone a seat at the table. And sitting at the table right now is Father Mike Pfleger, the pastor, the head pastor of Saints Divine Church, an advocate for community, someone who fights day in and day out for the community in the South Side Chicago here in Auburn Gresham. First of all, thank you for making time, Father
Thank
Mike.
you, sir. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Well, first of all, let us know what you do aside from pastoring the church. Let us know about all the programs and all that you do to engage the community out in Auburn Gresham.
Well, we run a school from preschool to 8th grade with 245 students. We run a youth center that runs 7 days a week, all day long until 10 o'clock at night. We run a Samaritan apartment building for low-income housing and 3 apartments for the homeless. We run a senior building for low-income seniors. We run an employment center across the street and a tech center where we do training and finding people jobs. And we run a social service center block from here to emergency needs, everything from housing, substance abuse, food, clothing, that administer about 40,000 people a year. So it's we try to do a one-stop, I think, whether it's jobs, whether it's food, whether it's education, whether it's housing, whether it's youth services, how we can try to meet the community best we can and serve the community we're in. Because I believe we owe this community if we're here as a tax-exempt organization, we owe this community, so we try to serve the community, as well as be a lobbyist for issues in the community, whether it's unemployment, whether it's poor schools, or what it is to be a voice.
And it's obvious because you guys are in so many different areas that you understand that the problem is multifaceted. The problem we're speaking about on this episode specifically is that of public safety. Now, it's funny, you actually, in talking about the programs you do to address each topic that we're going to hit, we're going to talk about economic disinvestment. We're going to talk about how to make sure that we distribute resources in Black communities across the country more equitably. But all of that kind of bubbles up to addressing this problem of public safety. You know, it's no secret that Chicago has a crime problem.
Right.
What would you say is at the core of that problem? How did we get to where we are? Because you aren't new to this.
Right. Well, and that's the issue. You look at the 10 or 12 communities that struggle most with the violence out of the 77 neighborhoods in Chicago. The reality is there's a common thread in every one of those communities. You see double-digit unemployment. You see poor and failing and underfunded schools. I mean, we just had a report, a month ago, 1 out of 4 Black children in failing schools in Chicago. You see lack of businesses and economic opportunities. You see most coming back from incarceration with bus card and $20 saying to make it and no opportunities. You see most foreclosures, most abandoned buildings. So you see this scenario of communities that really are treated like third world countries and have been neglected and abandoned by the system and by the city and by government. And then why are we surprised? You put 2 lions in a cage, don't feed one of them, one's going to eat the other. You cage in whole communities with neglect and abandonment and lack of resources. You are going to see violence. If you did the same thing for a period of 15, 20 years on the North Shore, you'd see the same exact scenario.
And we have seen it in a lot of immigrant communities. I mean, you had Irish mafias, Italian mafias, etc.
Absolutely.
The problem just kind of morphed and evolved. I think what's most frustrating to a lot of advocates when we talk about public safety is fused in with this issue of police, which it makes sense because it is incumbent on police to combat violence, but it seems like you may believe that the problem is more complex than that. So do you lay the issue of public safety, the responsibility of making sure the streets are safe, at the feet of the police,
right,
parents, community leaders?
I think it's all. I think we all have to own our part in this. Is that we need to do a better job parenting. We need to do a better job teachers in schools. We need to do a better job as being block club and neighbors to one another. We need to do better as churches. We need to do better as policing. I think all of that. We live in this very disconnected culture of society right now, and so we're not there for each other, and we're into this very self-consuming, just like me and my own, and we don't communicate. It's crazy. We have the more communication avenues open to us than ever before, and yet we're most disconnected than ever before. So we all have done our part in this puzzle of neglect. I think the difficulty with the policing thing is we always keep hearing we can't police our way out of this, which is absolutely right. But then we put all more money into policing and into overtime, but not into economic development and housing and schools and jobs in the community. So, and unless we have the courage to hit this multifaceted and all take our responsibility in it, it's not going to change. I have a Chicago Tribune paper from 1985. Tribune did like a 22-page thing over a series of a week of the things that cause communities to be violent and be abandoned. All the same issues that existed in 1985. You can do the same paper today, different date, different name, the same thing. So it didn't just get this way. It's been this way. It's just gotten worse.
Right.
And we've chosen to do nothing about it. We change what we want. In 1974, I used to run a soup line on Madison Avenue. I can't afford restaurants on Madison Avenue now. Look at where Maxwell Street was. Look at South Loop. We change what we want to. Look at Cabrini Green.
Yeah.
So we just have chosen to ignore, Lawndale and Auburn Gresham and Englewood and Roseland. We've ignored these communities. And so why are we surprised at the result?
But what further complicates it too is when those communities change for the better, usually black people get pushed out.
Absolutely. What's happening in Brownsville right now?
It's happening in Bronzeville. I mean, the South Loop goes further and further south, what we define as the South Loop.
Exactly.
And even thinking about the Obama Presidential Center, right? I think the Obama Foundation has great intentions, but they've stopped short of, agreeing to a community benefits agreement. And you have people concerned who live in the Jackson Park area. How will our area change when the center comes? How do we build up communities and allow the people who stay there to be beneficiaries?
Exactly. And we want a world-class golf course. But will people who live in the South Side be able to afford to go to that golf course? Right now, you can get into the Park District golf course at South Shore. What will happen when the world class comes in? Who will be able to afford to get into it? Look at United Center. Look at now guaranteed rate, and look at these ballparks and arenas. Who can get into them? So I think as we continue when we do development, we don't do it to help grow the neighborhood. We do it to create a new neighborhood and push out those who are there now into something else. And we better be looking real closely at what's happening in Englewood.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that you bring in Chipotle and Whole Food and a Starbucks and there's not plants.
So so we're at this interesting juncture where we're like right ahead of the curve before the gentrification is set to happen. And we have an African American president who's from Chicago, who's putting the resources back in the hood, back on the South Side. What's the smartest thing to do? Do you have any examples for which you've seen communities in other states and other cities at this juncture and have been able to move forward in a way that's transformed communities for the betterment of the people that already live there?
Not a whole lot. I think there's one in, I can't even think of the exact neighborhood in New York that was done where they kept the community strong, I think, and not gentrify it. I watched it in Auburn Gresham as we started to bring in community development. We brought in the Walgreens, we brought in BJ's Market, we brought in the bowling alley and the skating center, and we started to see we wanted to build homes, and we said no, the only homes we want to build, we built 26 homes that were affordable housing. And then he said, well, no, we got to bring in some market rate stuff. And we said, hold up, because we do not want to just gentrify these neighborhoods. So we actually went around and begged people, don't sell, don't move, stay here, and let the community grow with you in it, not out of it. And then what happening was a lot of people wanted to come and invest here, so we're not going to invest anymore. They were willing to invest in something that was going to be gentrifying.
Wow. But
they didn't want to invest in something that was going to continue to be. So let's make once again a African American middle class neighborhood that had those whole spectrum from poor to wealthy to doctors and to people who were struggling on minimum wage jobs. Let's try to create that kind of community, but there's no vision for that community. There's no commitment to that kind of community. I mean, as crazy as this sounds, as Tim L. Black said to me one time, he says, segregation forced us to stay together and build our communities. integration said, let's get up and get out of here.
Yeah,
And unfortunately that happened. When do we design a community to say that let's create a multi-class community and say that's what we want to create. We don't want to just transform and transport people from the community. When's the last time you ever heard that as a vision for a neighborhood?
It's always in theory, never in practice. Right? What year was this when we started to see?
We started to do all this in the late '90s, early 2000, and then people started to back off, and then comes 2008, and then the economic crisis, and then they came back in other neighborhoods. They weren't about to come in this neighborhood. I say, well, we want to, I actually had business owners say to me, well, we're looking for a more integrated neighborhood to come into. So we're looking more Beverly, and we're looking more, well, first of all, what's integrated? And second of all, why not come and invest in an African American neighborhood? People will invest in Hispanic neighborhoods, they'll invest in Chinatown, but we don't invest in black neighborhoods.
In the first episode, we talked about allyship because we did a panel with members from the Jewish community there. We did a panel with an advocate for African Americans with disability, or all people with disability, right? She just happened to be a black woman. But we talked about allyship, and I think you defined that, especially being a white man in an African American, pastor in an African American church. How did you get into this work, and how do you define allyship, what it means to be an ally?
Well, I got into it as a kid in high school when I first saw Dr. King and became obsessed with him. And I watched him march in Marquette Park and wanted to become more, a follower of his. I was crushed when he got killed in '68 because my job was to get out of college and go work full-time with Dr. King in the movement. And then he gets assassinated, and my whole life was rocked, and I found how to continue the things I want to do that he believed in. But I think Dr. King was a great model of that in the civil rights movement. He used to always be so clear that we had to bring other people into our cause. Even when his own cabinet was fighting against the Kennedys are never going to change. Bobby Kennedy, they're never going to get on cause. And he said, a very important line he told his cabinet, he said, go find their moral center and bring it to us. And he said that, he made a comment one time, he said, we're never going to really have America care about our cause until white people get involved in our cause. And a lot of people were shaken by that. He said, because we we're trying to take care of it and solve it ourselves. We can't solve it ourselves. Community, country, globally, we must be concerned about the issues of poverty and racism and sexism and all the rest. If we're not, then it just becomes your issue. Look at the power of what the gay and lesbian community did in making this a national issue. Look at the issue of, 15, 20 years ago, nobody cared about breast cancer. Nobody. There was a group of people that said, we're going to make this a national concern. They put money in it, and they put a lot of marketing in it, and now you have football players wearing pink. It became a consciousness, and thank God it did, for society. But if you look at, this is going to sound jaded, but if you look at whether it's the gay or lesbian movement, or you also look at the breast cancer movement, they affected white people. So because they affected white people, it was easier for them to come in and make this a national movement. But when you look at racism, or what are the communities of neglect and poverty and unemployment and that were most affected by it, it's primarily a black and brown issue. So we're not as easy to get involved, but that's why Dr. King said in the movement, we got to bring the children in. Right. He said, because people don't get affected by seeing you beat or you beat, but when they see a child have a hose turn on them, or a dog turn on them, or put into a paddy wagon, there's something about the consciousness of other people that say, oh no, that can't happen to our children. But that's when people started to get involved. And then you look back at the civil rights movement, he had Jews, he had Christians, he had Muslims, he had black, white, rich, poor, entertainers, all involved in it. How do we do that again?
how do you convince people of privilege to, I guess, to set that privilege aside, or use it rather, to advocate for communities that don't have that same privilege thing? Because, you know, I see these conversations happen on Twitter, and I'm of the mind, I'm split of it, because some people are of the mind of an adult has the thinking, the logic, the way they move. You can interject what you think every now and then, and it might bend them a little bit, but you can't change a grown person's mind. And then there are other people who say, no, you keep at it, you keep on giving them logic, tell them things that make sense, mm that compassion, and then you convert. How do you see that whole thing?
Well, I think there's a couple ways. I think number one is you got to stay at it. You got to, Dr. King's principles of social change was first you educate, then you negotiate, then you do self-purification, then you demonstrate. You got to keep raising the bar until you get to them so it affects them. Obviously, education should be enough. So you should be able to just point out the injustices, and it ought to be enough to get people to get involved. But unfortunately, the injustices aren't enough, because oftentimes you find the injustices, for them to get involved, and may lose some of their power and wealth.
There you go.
So they stay at a distance. But I think the second thing is now, I was in a group, speaking to a group about a week ago down at the Union League Club, and it was a group of primarily all white people, and they're saying, well, how do we stop that crime? I said, well, number one is you got to see it as your crime. This is your city. 20 minutes from here, when's the last time you went down there and got involved? When's the last time wealthy people in high-rises in downtown Chicago went in and called a meeting with Mary Emanuel and said, the disproportionate of poverty and education in the city is not acceptable to us? When's the last time you went in and confronted him? Because guess what? Us crying at a school board meeting about bad schools, they say, well, that's their problem. You go in, who are power breakers and shakers in the city, and you talk about that issue board meeting, they're going to listen to you, because guess what? You're a CEO. You have power. You're on boards. So when do you get involved in this? Number one, just because it's right. But the second thing is, which is happening, because at every one of these conversations I've had in the last 6 to 8 months, somewhere in it, underlying, comes up the question, well, now this violence is coming downtown. Yay. Now you care, because it's at your door. And what you have to be careful is you don't want to solve it at your door. Just keep it locked in. But now it's coming to your neighborhood. Nobody cared about drugs. Nobody cared about drugs until congressmen and women's children were on drugs, until wealthy people's children were on drugs. Then we have to have a war on drugs. So unfortunately, until it comes to your door, let's look what's going on right now at the NFL. You really think that Dallas Cowboys are coming out before the flag comes out because they're concerned about what Cap Burst said about racism, brutality, injustice? No, this is money. This is money now, because now, first of all, he's telling the NFL owners what to do. Rich people do not like to be bullied. They don't like to be told what to do. Now he's saying we should boycott these games until people stop kneeling. Now you're talking about their pocketbook and their players being upset. Oh, we got to get involved now. So we've watched the whole issue switch. Started out about brutality, racism, and justice. Then it was switched to, it's about patriotism and the flag and veterans. But now it's really about
money.
Money.
I think about like what protests actually mean, and people say this often. They say, black communities protest when the police kill a black man, but not when another person kills a black man. What do you think is the role of protest as we talk about nonviolence?
I always have seen protests as two things. Number one, to stand up against injustice. And in my mind, that's what we hear. We march in the community all the time.
I always joke and say you can't go to Auburn Gresham without tripping and falling into a protest. You got to march on the way to the corner store and then get where you're going.
Right. We're out here marching about things, and we've been able to take in our immediate area here, drop violence 86%. We're involving the community, empowering the community, working with the brothers in the street, getting them jobs. We have 4 former gang guys on full-time staff here for the last 6 years that work in the community. So protest is to put the focus, put the light, raise the banner of injustice that's going on. But protest has to be more than, now after the protest is over, what are you going to do to change the situation? That's why we run an employment center. That's why we run a social service. That's why we have an apartment building for housing. That's why we have programs here like Strong Futures and the Peacemaker and the rest, because if protest is just focused on the issue, but then not how to, what are the things that need to be done to change this issue. You know, Dr. King, you know, used to say that, take the funeral of the 4 Birmingham girls that were killed. And at that funeral, he was very clear about, we must arrest the person who placed this bomb, who killed these 4 little girls. But we must also arrest the system that created the bomber. If we don't do both, then we're not solving anything. So yes, and protests need to be in the community, and they need to be downtown. They need to be about the injustices that ignores this, and about the injustice on the street. Look, I'm 100% against prison, because I think they're horrible. They make money. They're inhumane. I was chaplain at the county jail for 2 years. When I was in seminary, I saw it there. But I also believe 95% of the brothers out here in the street, given an option, given an opportunity, are going to go with that 5%, just going to keep shooting, you know, whatever, that's their choice. Okay, they have to go to prison. You cannot kill, go back home and eat McDonald's and watch TV. No, not here. So anybody shoots and kills in this neighborhood, if you kill somebody, whether child or adult, we put up a $5,000 reward because that person has to go off the street. But at the same time, you just can't tell people to put the guns down, stop shooting, stop selling drugs. Are you kidding me? And do what? So let's make the opportunity. And then you got to go downtown and fight and kick in doors to offer the jobs. We took 50 guys last August. We fought for the city to give us some money. They didn't give us all we wanted, but they gave us some. We raised some, used our infrastructure here. We took 50 guys at risk. And what I mean at risk were felonies, some had ankle bracelets on, parole, the whole 9 yards. Took their data from all of them, sent it to a couple of universities to give us a feedback on them. 42 to 46% of them likely to be arrested or shot in the next 3 to 4 years. Okay, this is who we want. We hired 3 staff members to work with them full time. This is their family, create relationship, create support, create training, create helping, get you back on your feet, stabilizing something to do with housing too, because they had no place to stay. Do all that. So that was toward the end of last August when we start interviewing and getting the 50 on board and going forward. As of September this year, 45 of the 50 are in full-time jobs. You know, shooters on the street are going to work every day now. But it was not just getting them a job, getting them all the wraparound and the support and the family sense to help them with that job. Now we've taken some more on. My hope is to go to another 50 over the next month, month and a half, and expand it. The 58,000 that they document is probably 70,000 between 17 and 28. Not working, not at school. What are we doing for them? Band program, great. Millions of dollars to mentoring in high school, great. But what are we doing for the 58,000 on the street? They're not working on school, who are your number 1 perpetrators, number 1 victims. We don't care about them. They're disposable. They're throwaways. Foundations don't want to get involved with them. Government doesn't want to get involved with them because it's too risky, unless it's your kid.
Right. I was just telling someone, they always say, I wish these boys would pull their pants up and wear suits and blah, blah, blah. I said, they'd just be well dressed on the same corner, because you got to, when you tell them to put the gun down, either give them something to pick up or give them somewhere to wear a suit too.
I tell people when they say to me, hey, you need to pull his pants up. Give him a job, he'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Last question. What is something that people can do today that within their spheres of influence can address this issue of crime, violent crime in the city?
I think first of all, refuse to get used to it. Refuse to be...
That's a hard one to start off with.
I know.
Like that. Yeah.
Free to be desensitized. Refuse to get desensitized to it. Refuse to get overwhelmed by it, because you can just get shut down because it's so great and it's so massive. You got to use your pain as our group here, purpose over pain. Use your pain and move it into a purpose. So I'm going to fight this. I refuse to accept it. This is not norm. So it starts with my house. It starts with my block. And this block, we're going to get together. We're not going to allow our children to feel afraid on our block. You don't need police for that. You need your block to come together and say, you know what, we're coming together on this block. We put all these little signs up about no parking here, no repair cars here. No, you are not going to hurt our children on our block. And you start with that. And then you move to how do we unite block to block to block and begin to say how we're going to fight a city that's neglecting and abandoning us. Not just by voting. That's good and that's important. I believe in that. But after the vote, I don't care who wins, that we're going to keep you, your feet in the fire to say, what are you doing? And force them to get involved, force them to get engaged, force them to bring the resources they got to do. Force the church that's not doing anything, that's opening up, 2 days a week. Force the store owner that's open all day, taking money closed up and going to live in the suburbs at night. Demand that those who are in your community serve your community. Whether it's the alderman, whether it's the pastor, whether it's the store owner. But it starts with home, starts with block, and then look at your community and say, how do we empower ourselves to take control of our community and not become victims of our community? And I think that is fighting the forces that be, and going to the school board meeting, demanding the school. It's overwhelming and it's unsensitive. Oh my God, this is so much to do. Do your part. Start with your home and your block, and then see what we can do together on the bigger issues in the community.
That's right. That's Reverend Father Michael Pfleger. He's the pastor of St. Sabina Church here in Auburn Gresham. This is the Chicago Urban League podcast, Culture, Race, and Equity, a seat at the table. I'm Doma T. Pongo.